and get an embodied sense of what's happening here. Yeah? So if, and if you knew that rollers helped you a little bit yesterday, if you knew that a roller, so if you needed a really big roller under your knees, say for example, you might just want to do this with your legs up, or find the position of your legs where you could most easily feel this, because we're going to be doing the oscillation from your heels. Yeah? But feel free also, there's lots of rollers, to get some rollers under you. What people found yesterday, because one of the things is it's very different doing this roll from the heels, which you'd be doing in jelly pudding, compared to Feldenkrais didn't have Larry weight bearing on his heels. And maybe there's a big reason he didn't have him weight bearing on his heels. So just play around and get the position. We're sort of going to be doing some oscillation, finding ground. Do you want something under your head? That makes your little jelly pudding oscillation. And again, remember, it's not just the jelly pudding going through me, but it's giving me ground. This jelly pudding is shifting the weight on the ground for me. Oh, what happened to those extra copies? The extra copies of the FI. I've probably got mine in here, Ruth. It's okay. I'll just have to find it. There were a couple of extra copies, though, weren't there? No, it'll be in here somewhere. Larry. I'll just see if I added anything, because this is an old one I've got here. There it is. Connecting head to torso. Oh, that's an extra. That's yours, thanks. This is an extra one. It's great. It's still not the... And again, notice as you're lying what all of these judo funny positions, finding novel ways to have to shift your weight. In all these funny positions, what have they been doing to how you contact the ground? And again, so you've had a few moments just to explore, as I do this jelly pudding from my heels, do I feel that there's more an up or a down in my oscillation? So is my sense that there's more of an accent on my foot going down? Or is there more of an accent for me on my foot pulling up? So to notice the part of the heel that you're rolling across. Is it easier for you to sort of rock down toward the bottom of your heel, or to rock up toward the top of the heel? To rock up more toward your Achilles tendon. And as you're doing it, really begin to notice if you put one hand softly on your sternum, upper sternum, and you begin to do this oscillation. And for most of us, just you can slow it down a little bit if you want, as your toes go, or your toes go down as your weight transfers more toward the bottom of your heel or toward the heel bone, that because the floor is a constraint, where would your chin go? So as you're rolling down, as you're looking more for that downward direction, and can you feel generally your chin would get pulled down a little bit? Which is the same as when we're doing a pelvic tilt, isn't it? Okay, I can see this isn't clear for some of you. So bend your knees, have your feet standing. And again, feel where the weight's resting on the back of your pelvis and how much of your sacrum is on the floor. This big triangular bone in the middle of your pelvis that goes from your lower back down towards your tailbone. And if you just began a gentle oscillation, a little gentle tilt across your sacrum. Is it easier for you to tilt a little bit more up toward your lower back? Or is it easier for you, is there more a little bit of a down in your movement where it's easier for you to tilt a little bit down in the direction of your tailbone? So just getting that sense first. Am I organised to go a little bit down relative to myself, or am I organised a little bit to go up relative to myself? And the tilt that your sternum and your sternum, your sacrum is in will give you a pretty good indication of that. Okay, so now if you tilt your down a little bit, so you're going a little bit more towards your tailbone, because you can't move backwards on the floor, where does your chin go as you go down toward the tailbone? Yeah, so our chin generally gets pulled down. What does your sternum do as your chin comes down? What direction does it move in? It lifts up a little bit, and really be thinking more of the upper part of your sternum, not so much the bottom. And could you begin to sense if you've got a little bit of sort of differentiation of your ribs from your spine, that as you go down and your weight's getting pulled down a little bit towards your feet and your chin gets pulled down, that the upper sternum moves upwards just a little bit. It's like your chin and your sternum, the upper sternum, come a little bit closer together. And as you go the other way with your pelvis, so you're rocking your sacrum a little bit more toward its upper end. So this resting position of our pelvis has a huge impact on where our head is in space. So feel usually as we tilt up a little bit on our pelvis, the chin goes up. And then what does the upper sternum do? It goes down a little bit. So it's like, yeah, Your chin and your sternum come together a little bit, and then they go away from each other a little bit. Because this is really important to know when you're looking for someone's head position in lying or in any position, and where would you expect their sternum to be to get more of them in contact with the ground? To let that movement keep sort of rolling through them. And then just feel if you didn't let the top of the sternum respond. So it's sort of, if you were going up, it went up. And if you were going down, it went down. This is what lots of people do. No. So they don't have that differentiation that often lets their neck and upper back and shoulders have a little bit more freedom of movement. And again, really feel the difference that makes to how the movement oscillates through you. If you start to set up a little bit of an oscillation now, and you can do it from your feet if you like, or just your pelvis, and your feet are just doing a little push and pull. And just get a little sense of what's this softness in my upper chest, in my collarbones, my shoulder girdles. And after doing all those judo rolls, this should be pretty possible. How does that influence how the weight goes to the ground? Rather than it's more like a stick going through, which is more across the ground, not sort of into the ground. And then you can put your legs long again if you had them long. And just see can you still feel a sense of that connection as you oscillate from your heels. And if you don't feel it, please have your knees bent a little bit in some way. Or just hold your legs but bend them a little bit. But really, we're looking that you've got this little bit of softness in your upper torso. Great. Okay. So this is sort of your setup position. This is where Feldenkrais sort of started Larry, where there was already a sense that movement was possible. And just get a sense, even after doing those simple movements, something changed in your contact with the ground. Okay. So the first thing he did was to give Larry ground in his feet. So could you begin to roll over your heels, but feel that someone's giving you ground? So it's not just this really light roll, but someone has got their hands on you where they're giving you ground as they roll your heel in. And this giving ground allows you to keep breathing easily. It actually helps you breathing. So it's not about pushing, which is what we've talked a lot about. And then you could do both together. Getting this sense of really having the ground be your friend and really supporting you, because you haven't yet developed that lightness. And I can see some of you are getting it beautifully as it's coming in. Can you remember as he was getting this with Larry, how his back started to soften into the ground more? so that there was sort of an up. And then once you've got that sense, and you can do this with one leg, you bring your leg into that position where you've really got ground, and then you imagine someone's coming in on your toes or your foot, and they're feeling what are the parts of the foot that are most connected to this feeling of having ground? What are the parts of the foot that still connect with that I can use the ground? And if someone twiddled some parts of your foot, would you feel it would lose that connection to the ground? So they're sort of connected. And you can really remember Feldenkrais with Larry. He was showing him that as the leg rolled in, the heels tended to roll out a little bit. And then you could imagine someone gently pushing, as he did, across. So you're going, no? He's giving you ground. He's really showing you as he's pushing into your foot. Think Feldenkrais. Just imagine his hands on you. And he's got the ground. And you're just getting that sense. And then at the end, he brought both together and gently pushed through both feet, finding this midline so that the legs came in, they had the ground. He gently pushed through to give Larry more ground. And just see, does this make sense to you? These things. And we'll see if, as we go on, if it gets a little clearer. Okay. So then he went up to Larry's head. And remember that Larry, what position? Can you remember Larry's head? He had him on a roller. And he was pulling through his chin. But could you imagine if someone had your chin in their hands, that they had all of you in their hands? So they're not thinking about just holding your chin, but they're thinking, I've got your chin and I'm going to use the chin, your chin, as a way to, again, pull you along the ground. So this would be the same movement that we were doing before about your chin going up. So he's thinking through this whole pattern of movement. So for Larry's chin to pull up, where would his sternum go? What would his pelvis be doing? Do I really sense that whole movement through myself of what I'm looking for? And then just go back to your feet again. Roll your legs in again. Because then maybe you can find, after doing that from the top end, has anything changed in your feet? You feel maybe, because then he started doing some circles with the feet and the toes, but everything he was doing, Larry, had ground and it was connecting through him. So how could you, get that roll across the ground, feel more of the ground, and then begin to circle your feet, your toes and your midfoot there, or whatever makes sense from whatever spot, and feel that's going through me. It's not just a movement I'm doing with my feet. This whole organization I've done is that this is going through me, these circles. Could you also now go up to the top again and feel, has that made any difference to being able to lift your jaw, lift your head? Does that feel any clearer through to you? So he's always moving with Larry. He's not staying in one position. So he's pulling through his jaw and chin to lengthen him up. And we would always usually pull. This is a lever we would use to extend the neck a little bit. We wouldn't do this. It wouldn't make sense to be pulling the chin up if the neck was flexed. So there's going to be a little curve in your neck. And then he repositioned Larry's head. So after doing all of that Larry liked doing with his chin forward, he then lifted Larry's head, and it was light because he distributed the weight to do that. And Larry's chin came down closer to his chest. So you can remember he repositioned where the roller was. You know, he brought it down a little bit where the roller was under the back of Larry's head, so that he got now a little, by going all of that way and arching his neck a little bit, he uses that then to lengthen the neck a little bit so the chin can come closer to the chest. And then he rolled his head. I mean, there's lots of variations. And again, he was looking for ground. So at this point with Larry, he's not looking for how lightly can I roll your head. He's looking for, can I give you ground? Can I give you ground? And see if you can feel the difference. If someone rolled your head to give you a sense of lightness, and if someone rolled your head to give you a sense of ground. And you could really see with Larry, because his neck was longer, as he rolled his head, Larry's chin was coming closer to his shoulder. It wasn't going away from his shoulder. It was coming closer to his shoulder as he rolled. It didn't stay up. It went down. So then he could begin to push through the top of Larry's head because the neck was now long. So when we usually push through someone's head, we're looking that the extensors have given up their work, that we've got length in the neck, so that then he's going to push through Larry's head and show him that he can find ground again, somewhere down in his chest, his middle, that the weight can roll over different ribs. So he's beginning to show that Larry's head can move out of the middle. His weight would shift, that his head can't roll easily unless he uses the ground to let his weight shift. He's then taking him a little bit over to the side, pushing down through his head. And it's all about giving Larry more ground. More places of him that can soften into the ground, shift their weight. And then he went back, went up to the fascia of the neck and the face. So he's sort of moving the fascia, moving the over the bones. So you have to remember that the facial muscles can be so expressive because the facial muscles attach to the fascia more than bone. And that's why you can sort of scalp people. You can peel their face off, if you like. So he's doing all this movement. Softening, moving. How can my scalp become soft? So a lot of people, their scalps don't move very much over their skull. And that's to do with an overall tension usually throughout their body. He's sort of mobilizing all of this scalp. He does a really gentle movement on Larry's eyes, gently putting his fingers on his eyes and giving him ground there as well. How can your eye settle back, Larry? How can it give up some of its habitual work, that you don't have to work so hard with your eyes to get ground or to find out where you are? And then he did a lot with the ears, a lot of moving the fascia around Larry's ears. So why would he be really interested in the ears, do you think? You think it's because that the ears are the closest sensory organ, closest teleceptor to where our skull joins onto our spine. So if you went through the axis of the ears, you would go straight through, basically, see your skull C1, C2. So to mobilize ourselves from our ears is a really easy way to begin to feel, can I find some mobility in this person's upper cervical spine? Because if they're very visual, and that's where they scan from all the time, it's a really different way of turning your head if you overuse your eyes than to think about the ears. So, and I know that someone doesn't do that very much. Their head isn't that connected to their sense of hearing. If this isn't free, huh? They're doing work, because what we're looking for in our organisation is the head gets so free that I hear a sound and my ear leads me. Not my pelvis, not my shoulders, but my sense organ is ready to go. So by, again, working with Larry, then we talked about he's pretty tight. How's this a way in to giving him a sense that some of these deep holding patterns can begin to go? So what's happened to your contact with the floor after doing all that? What's happened to your breathing after doing all that? So then he goes to his pelvis, puts his hands on his pelvis, and he starts to tilt Larry's pelvis, and he's still thinking of up, but he's more thinking of ground. So this angle that he's tilting Larry's pelvis in is to allow more of him to go to the ground. So if you can just imagine someone's hands on your pelvis, and they're going to tilt in a direction to give you ground. And what you'll feel is if you try and tilt them toward an area that's not touching the ground, this won't be very easy to do. This is the principle we're using over and over. So you have to feel, where's my ground? Because for some of you, it still might be in your chest. So wherever I'm tilting someone's pelvis to do this, I'm tilting it to where they already know the ground, not to some abstract spot that I think it might go to. And feel the difference. If someone, you can imagine someone tilting your pelvis in the thing of giving you more ground, what would your breathing do if they held it there? What would your breathing do if they just held it there? If they gave your system time to go, what can I give up here? What have I been doing that I can give up because I've got more ground? Huh? And often you have to give time for their system. Yeah, his breathing really improved, really changed at that point. And as I said, it wasn't that he had a big breath and lifted himself away from the ground, but that breath came because he had more ground so he could give up some of his habitual work. So at this stage of the lesson, Larry's chin was a little bit more up. So Feldenkrais was doing some movement to soften his sternum and ribs down a little bit. But again, always heading it toward ground. So again, you've got to find your ground here. You've got to feel, if someone had their fingers on my sternum and ribs at the front, where would I be sending it? Because Larry's chin was up. Would it be a little to the left or the right? Straight down. Where would I be helping Larry to find more ground? And that they maybe could begin to sense that as their sternum lightly went down, that their chin would want to go up a little bit. So that you're still really clear in what you're doing here, that you're not just pushing them down, but this is going down in a way that's going to ask their chin to move up, which is what the whole pelvic tilt's about. He then came under the base of Larry's neck. He did quite a bit of then coming in under his shoulders, still shifting weight and going with where Larry, the direction that he could go in, which was a little bit down. So his chin kept lifting a little bit as he found the ground. And then once he'd done that, so he's gone where Larry wants to go, and then he starts going the other way with the sternum and the ribs. And hey presto, Larry's head starts to respond because there's a congruency in what he's asking him. So then he's gently lifting Larry through his sternum and ribs, and Larry's neck starts to get a little bit longer. So what's available here? You know, which will go with what's easy, where the person is, and then we'll see. But when we say we're going with what's easy, it's what fits a full pattern of the movement using the ground. So then it could come in. And he could begin, then he started, once he went to the other way, which was the sternum lifts up a little bit, Larry got a little bit longer in his neck. Then he came through and started pressing down through the first rib. To find different parts of Larry to go to the ground. But Larry's head is responding. So it's not just we've got this oscillation. It's an oscillation that he's looking for all the time. He rolled his head again. He does lots of repetition. And how does that feel now to roll your head? Are you getting more sense now that as your head's rolling, your weight's shifting? That you're getting ready maybe to go somewhere? He went back then to the face, the neck. Remember, he turned the head over to one side with the neck getting longer, and he worked all through the muscles of the upper neck. And again, you're going to do what's appropriate for the person you're working with. But the big thing is he keeps moving. This is about spreading Larry's attention. With someone like Larry, you're not going to stay in one place. Because Larry needs to feel this is connected to this, is connected to this, is connected to this. So we have to keep moving. And if I spend too long in one spot, their attention will stop there and I'll lose the ability to keep Larry moving his attention. This is connected, this is connected, this is connected, this is connected. They're not separate parts. So do your little oscillate again now and see, how does it feel? Anything feel different? Maybe you could oscillate more with one leg than the other and feel, does that go through you? And then he went to working with the big toes and the thumbs. So when he was doing all this with the big toes and thumbs, and these are just things you're going to explore and do, try it in lots of different ways, but he absolutely had all of Larry. So when he went to his big toe, he organized it that his weight could roll across the ground again, that he had ground, his breathing was easy, he had this oscillation, and keeping all of that connection, he started moving his big toe. And one of the things, remember, we discovered yesterday was that that idea of the big toe and the thumbs tend to bring us a little bit more midline in our awareness rather than the little finger and the outside toes. And we need both. So some people, you're going to do the opposite to what you're going to do with Larry. And then he did the same thing, but he lifted Larry's arm. First, this is the first time he's lifted a limb. So Larry's now organized to lightly lift his arm, but he's keeping connection. It's not just hanging out there, not connected to him. He's kept it in a position where he could oscillate through that arm if he wanted to. And then he's saying, and here's your thumb, Larry, here's your thumb. And he does that both sides. But always with this sense of deep connection to the ground. Larry's system, the tones equalizing, he's finding the ground more. So his system is calming. He's finding is creating a learning environment for Larry. He's finding these things we talked about the other day, that movability across the ground, equalisation of tonus that we know because the movement goes through easily, that his head is getting soft, it's connected through. His head and his pelvis are connected. And then he went back to Larry's face. And now he went more to the jaw and the tongue. Oh, how could this this tissue round here begin to move? Remember what he did with the nose and you were all laughing? But how might that affect your breathing if you're really used to holding your nasal passages in a particular way? And he's going in there and he's getting Larry's nose and he's pushing it down. And can you feel he's using it as a little bit of a lever also, because as I said, all the facial muscles are attached through the scalp to the back of the neck, to start to move his scalp a little bit, to feel that this might be a way in to letting his neck get softer. So it's not just that he's twiddling with his nose. He then pushed through Larry's head in flexion again. So Larry was now longer in his neck, but he had ground because his head had got lighter. His head had got lighter because he could shift the weight to other parts to get it light. But he's still got it, giving him lots of support on the rollers. He's pushing through, saying there's down, Larry. And then he takes out the rollers. So if you've got some rollers underneath you, take them out. And just see what's happened by having that support. There's something being able to give a little bit more to the ground. And what's the part of you that all of this has enabled to get more to the ground? This part of you that maybe you didn't even know always held away from the ground. And it might not be where the rollers were. And then he decides to bring Larry up to sitting. And again, this is a really interesting thing at the call of a lesson. How do I decide that I'm going to bring someone, I'm going to help them with this transition? Because at the moment I feel if they do it on their own, a lot of that learning state is going to go. A lot of this sense of all of them in the image is going to go. So can you remember how he brought him up? He went under, he lifted the base of his neck. So he shifted Larry's weight, which he'd been doing already, brought his legs up. They were light to bring up. They were in the air, remember? They didn't go to the side. He had his legs up in the air. So what's Larry going to have to roll over to come up to sitting? His torso. And he swings him up to sitting. So now you feel like Larry felt at the end of the lesson. Well, you'll never feel like Larry felt, but you've, you know. So how do you feel on the ground at the moment? If someone came along and I got Beck and I said, how much of your back would be touching the ground at the moment, Beck, in sitting, if we put something behind it? everything, yeah? What's happened? Huh? What? With this sense of length and width. What's it done to your sense of attention? Maybe you can, we've given that your head maybe is a little freer. No? And your skeleton is supporting you. It's doing the work. So begin to feel a little bit of what we did yesterday. If you took your head somewhere, how ready is your pelvis to follow? How easy is it for you to shift across the ground? And you haven't got Feldenkrais here to carry you up. But how could you come up to standing and feel you're just going to keep shifting your weight? You wouldn't come straight up after this lesson. Can you feel? Yeah? You're going to much more use a... You're just going to keep shifting your weight like a baby does. Yeah? One hand, pelvis keeps moving, hands keep moving. You just keep shifting your weight. And again, what's your sense of yourself after this lesson? Why might this be a valuable lesson to give someone? Up here all the time, maybe? Yeah, this is very parasympathetic. Very parasympathetic. But you can feel you're not down. And can you feel now, because your skeleton for most of you should be supporting you a little bit more, you're not at your full height. You know, when we were talking the other, you've still got a little bit that you can go up or down. There's still a little bit of give in your system. You're not up here. You're not at your, you've still got a little bit of give. Doesn't mean you can't be here, but at the moment after this lesson, how easy would it be if it's all been, well, how much of your foot's touching the ground? How many places have you got to shift your weight on your foot? And again, this is really important with balance. Because you've got more places to shift your foot, how many different places could you put that other foot? So that, say I'm walking along and something, I'm not going to fall. I've got many places I can save myself with my foot. Okay, so you're going to give the lesson now. You've got your sheet, hopefully, that you've got your cheat sheet that you can look at. And again, these movements don't have to be done in any particular order. It's just keep moving. Do you know what I mean? Don't get stuck in one place. Just keep moving around. And could you start the lesson? In standing, remember that little bit we did yesterday. So Beck, do you want to sit for a minute? So we're going to start with Beck in sitting, sorry. We're going to look at how much of her would be available to touch the back. Yeah. And I'm just going to, with that light touch, where can she go? And most of you are going to be pretty organised at the moment. But what you could feel is, Beck, could you just be you a little bit more, or another way of being you? And look at those back muscles. Up. And just to feel, how does that influence this? No? And then go back again. Look at that reversibility. That's what I want. No? Just how lightly can your head take you somewhere? No? And we'll talk later next week about when their head doesn't move, what are some other strategies, but at the moment, just feel that. At the beginning, do the lesson and see what happens by the end. Okay? So it's 20 to 12.